Joan of Arc was born around 1412 in Domremy, Bar, France. She believed she was under divine guidance from God and several saints, who she claimed helped her as she led the French army to victory at Orleans during the 100 Years' War. She was captured a year after this victory and was sentenced to death by the English and their French collaborators as a heretic. Today we will be learning in brief about her role in this war, role in King Charles VII's coronation, and her execution. Before we get started, if you enjoy learning about history, please subscribe and check out more videos on my channel. During the time surrounding Joan starting her mission, the crown of France was being disputed between the Dauphin, or heir, Charles, later Charles VII, and the Lancastrian English king Henry VI. This dispute was worsened by the fact that Charles was still uncrowned 5 years after his father's death. He went so long without a coronation because Reims, the place where French kings were traditionally coronated, was in enemy territory. The longer he remained without a crown, the more likely the King of France was to be challenged. Joan's mission was to aid Charles in having his coronation. Claiming that she was led by the voices of saints, in May of 1428 Joan went to Vaucouleurs, the nearest stronghold to her that was still loyal to Charles. There, she asked the captain of the garrison for permission to join Charles. However, given that she was only a 16-year-old girl, the captain refused and Joan had to return home. But Joan was persistent and returned back in January of 1429. This time, she managed to gain the respect of the people in the area and convinced the captain to allow her to go to Chinon, where Charles was. She left for her journey there on February 13th, dressed in men's clothing and with 6 men-at-arms. Upon arriving, Joan went to the castle Charles was staying in. After 2 days, he granted her an audience, during which Joan told him she wanted to battle the English and promised to have him crowned at Reims. To test her claims of being guided by God and saints, she was questioned for weeks by ecclesiastical authorities in an attempt to detect any heresy. Joan told them she would prove her mission at Orleans. In their report after the questionings, churchmen suggested Charles should use her to help at Orleans, which had been under English siege for several months. Charles agreed and Joan's time in the military began. That April, Charles gave Joan a military household of several men. When it was time to get Joan a sword, she said that one would be found in the church of St. Catherine de Fierbois. A sword was found where she said it would be. On April 27, 1429, French troops set out towards Orleans, which they found to be almost completely surrounded by English strongholds. When Joan arrived, she was told that they had to wait for reinforcements before fighting. On the evening of May 4th, when Joan was sleeping, she awoke suddenly and announced that she had to attack the English. After arming herself, she went to an English fort, where she saw a fight already happening. Joan joined the French and won. They continued to win several other forts over the next several days until the English finally surrendered. Joan traveled to several other towns with Charles, winning battle after battle along the way. While doing this, she repeatedly tried to persuade Charles to go to Reims to have his coronation. Eventually, he agreed, and they headed for the city on June 29th. They captured several more towns on their way and arrived to Reims on July 16th. The coronation took place on July 17, 1429, with Joan being present and standing near the altar. She believed that this completed her mission, but continued to fight for King Charles VII. One day, while fighting the Burgundians in Compiègne, Joan was unhorsed and was unable to remount. She had to give herself up and was taken to Margny. When the people and king were told of what happened to Joan, she was accused of rejecting counsel. The king made no attempts to save her. Joan was taken to John of Luxembourg's castle in Vermandois. She tried to escape to rejoin the fight in Compiègne, but was stopped and moved to a castle farther away. There, she tried to escape to Compiègne again, this time jumping from the top of a tower and landing unconscious in a moat. After recovering, she was taken to Arras. By January 3, 1431, Joan was handed over to the Bishop of Beauvais to be tried as a heretic. This was due to her beliefs not being strictly orthodox and her claims of being able to directly communicate with God, which threatened the Church's hierarchical system. It was also hoped that her trial could help discredit Charles VII by showing his coronation took place due to someone who was either a witch or a heretic. When Joan was questioned by judges, she swore to tell the truth, but refused to divulge everything since the judges were enemies of King Charles. Over the course of a little over a month, Joan was interrogated almost a dozen times. When the official trial began, it took 2 days for Joan to answer the 70 charges against her. Most of these charges were due to her behavior that was considered blasphemous, such as making prophecies and wearing men's clothing. The 70 charges were brought down to 12, which were then sent to theologians. While in prison, Joan got sick. Despite this, she was still persistently pushed to answer questions. After constantly refusing, she was told on May 23rd that she would be turned over to the secular authorities if she didn't comply. This was so concerning because the secular authorities were able to carry out the death sentence on heretics. On May 24th, Joan was taken to have her sentence read out. She had to first listen to a sermon attacking Charles VII, then had the sentence abandoning her to secular powers read out. At this, Joan said she would comply with the church and agreed to sign a form of abjuration, then was condemned to perpetual imprisonment. She was also ordered to put on women's clothes, which she complied with. 2 or 3 days after this event, judges visited Joan in prison and found her back in men's clothing, which she told them she preferred. They once again questioned her, but Joan went back to refusing to answer questions, stating that the voices of St. Catherine of Alexandria and St. Margaret of Antioch were unhappy with her abjuration. At this, the judges decided that they needed to give her to secular officials. On May 30th, 1431, Joan received permission to make her confession and receive communion, which was uncommon for convicted heretics to be allowed to do. She was then given another sermon and the sentence abandoning her to the secular arm. She was taken by the executioner to the stake, where he lit the pyre. This entire time, Joan maintained that her words were sent by God. When later investigated, most witnesses believed she had salvation and that she died a faithful Christian. In 1450, 19 years after Joan's death, Charles VII ordered an inquiry into the trial. 2 years after that, another investigation was also done. Then, proceedings were done between 1455 and 1456 that revoked and annulled Joan's sentence. It wasn't until May of 1920 when Joan was finally canonized as a saint. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're interested in this topic, I would highly recommend looking into it more, as there are so many details about Joan's life that I just couldn't fit into this summary. If enough people are interested, I might make a future video or videos covering parts of her life in more depth. So if you are interested in this, please let me know in the comments. I'd also appreciate it if you would consider liking and subscribing, as it helps me out a lot in the algorithm. Bye!